Did you know that the system supporting American farmers is unraveling right before our eyes? The BRICS Trading Alliance, a powerful coalition of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is not just reshaping global trade, it's also hitting American agriculture hard. Once the dominant force in global food production, U.S. farmers are now being pushed aside in international markets, and the effects are devastating. What's even more alarming is that this shift is happening quietly, and by the time it gets the public's attention, it may already be too late to reverse the damage. To understand why American farmers are losing their competitive edge, we need to look at how the BRICS nations are changing the global trade landscape. Historically, the US dollar has been the cornerstone of international trade. But now, the BRICS nations, representing over 55% of the world's population and nearly 30% of global GDP, are making moves to break free from the dominance of the dollar. They're establishing their own trade networks, and this spells bad news for American farmers. Take wheat, for example. In 2023, U.S. wheat exports to China fell by a staggering 32%, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Meanwhile, Brazil's wheat exports surged by 40%, thanks to trade agreements within the BRICS framework that make it easier for member countries to do business together. Russia, now China's primary wheat supplier, is also pulling away from U.S. grain markets. According to John Hayes, an agricultural economist at Harvard University, the BRICS nations are building a parallel trading system that bypasses the U.S. entirely. They've created their own price discovery mechanisms and trading blocks, which have effectively undermined U.S. farmers. This isn't a temporary shift. It's a permanent restructuring of the global trade order. Over the past 5 years, U.S. farm exports to BRICS countries have dropped by 15%, while intra-BRICS agricultural trade has skyrocketed. For instance, Brazil alone exported over $15 billion worth of grain to BRICS countries in 2022. The implications are huge. As the Wall Street Journal points out, American farmers are facing a historic decline due to the expansion of the BRICS trading bloc. As these new trade networks bypass the U.S. dollar, American farmers are losing their position in global markets at an alarming rate. But how did this happen? How is it possible that the U.S., once a dominant agricultural powerhouse, is now facing a trade deficit in the very industry it helped build? This may seem counterintuitive, but according to the U.S. Department of Commerce, the agricultural trade deficit reached nearly $12 billion in 2023, a shocking turnaround from the surplus the U.S. enjoyed just a decade ago. While American farmers still export vast quantities of crops, imports are growing at a faster rate, and price competition is a major factor. BRICS nations have developed trading systems that allow them to produce and sell goods at prices that undercut U.S. producers. Take Brazil, for example. It has now surpassed the U.S. as the world's largest exporter of soybeans. Brazil can offer lower prices due to cheaper labor and favorable BRICS trade deals, which forces American farmers to compete on an uneven playing field. In 2022, U.S. agricultural imports hit a staggering $194 billion, while exports lagged at $182 billion. This marked the first significant agricultural trade deficit in decades, with BRICS countries steadily taking market share from U.S. producers. Thomas Lear, an international trade expert, explains that the U.S. simply can't compete with the low production costs and favorable currency trade agreements that BRICS nations enjoy. But it's not just about the numbers. It's also about the systemic changes happening in global trade. For decades, global transactions, whether involving oil, wheat, or other goods, were processed through the SWIFT banking system, with the U.S. dollar as the standard. This system gave American farmers a sense of stability. But that stability is quickly disappearing as BRICS nations bypass the U.S. dollar and create their own financial systems. American farmers are facing a much more unpredictable environment. The prices for key crops like corn, wheat, and soybeans are becoming less stable, and profitability is on the decline. The new BRICS currency trade agreements allow these nations to bypass U.S. sanctions and economic influence, enabling them to undercut American agricultural exports. As a result, farmers are now in competition with countries they've never even heard of, with prices they can't control. James Winkler, a U.S. farmer, describes the frustration. "I used to know what my crops were worth, but now I'm competing with countries I've never heard of for prices I can't control." Despite U.S. agricultural exports remaining high, the actual value of those exports is shrinking. In 2022, the U.S. exported $196 billion worth of agricultural products, But farmers were earning less due to falling global prices and increased competition. For instance, U.S. soybeans are now selling at 10% less than 2 years ago, as Brazil and Argentina flood the market with cheaper alternatives. The result? Shrinking margins for American farmers, forcing many to reconsider their futures. This economic strain is made worse by the consolidation of U.S. farming. Once dominated by small family-owned farms, U.S. agriculture is now increasingly controlled by large corporate farms, many of which operate internationally and are better equipped to compete with low-cost products from BRICS nations. A USDA report notes that in the past decade, the number of U.S. farms has dropped by 50,000, with smaller farms either going out of business or being sold off to corporate giants. The small American farmer is quickly becoming an endangered species. One significant factor in this decline is the growing difficulty of predicting demand. American farmers have long relied on market forecasts to guide what crops to plant, but these forecasts are becoming more unreliable as the BRICS trading system distorts global supply and demand. With large portions of the market now closed off due to shifting trade relationships, U.S. farmers are often left in the dark. Planting the wrong crop could mean the difference between success and financial. This uncertainty is also behind China's massive cancellations of U.S. wheat shipments in early 2023. China canceled over 1.7 million metric tons of U.S. wheat, a blow to an industry that heavily depends on exports. This move is part of a larger shift in global trade dynamics. Wheat prices dropped sharply in 2024. And experts believe China's decision is part of a broader strategy to strengthen economic ties with BRICS countries while reducing dependence on U.S. agriculture. As China turns to nations like Russia and Brazil for its wheat needs, U.S. farmers are facing growing competition. Brazil's wheat exports to China have surged by 25%, and Argentina's exports have increased by 30%. This trend is particularly damaging to U.S. farmers, who now find themselves in an unwinnable race. In 2023, U.S. soybean exports to China dropped by 15%, and corn exports fell by 20%. Meanwhile, Brazil and Argentina are capitalizing on this, with Brazil's soybean exports to China rising by 18% and Argentina's corn exports increasing by 22%. The result? Lower prices for U.S. farmers, who are struggling to maintain profitability. The BRICS grain exchange is accelerating this shift. The new exchange facilitates trade among BRICS nations at preferential rates, reducing reliance on Western markets and allowing member countries to negotiate better terms. The exchange has already reduced global grain prices by 5%, shifting the balance of power in agricultural trade. According to trade experts, this development puts non-BRICS countries, including the U.S., at a disadvantage. Meanwhile, China's reduced demand for grain is causing ripples through global markets. As China boosts domestic grain production and cuts its reliance on imports, global grain prices are fluctuating unpredictably. This financial instability is adding more challenges for U.S. farmers. What does this mean for the future of U.S. agriculture? The BRICS trading system is fundamentally changing the global landscape, and U.S. farmers are at risk of losing more market share as trade patterns shift and prices decline. American farmers are being squeezed out of global markets, and the consequences could be far-reaching, affecting global food prices and the financial stability of U.S. agriculture. As these global shifts continue to unfold, one thing is clear: the stakes are higher than ever for U.S. farmers. Will they be able to adapt to these new trade realities? Or will they continue to lose ground to BRICS nations? Only time will tell. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us grow, and we appreciate your feedback. Stick around for more updates on how these global changes are impacting agriculture, trade,